Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar. Today we're going to talk about securing our malware with Amazon FSx for NetApp ONTAP. Before we begin, a little bit of housekeeping. Please feel free to post your questions in the Q&A part of the webinar. We have chat responders who will respond to the questions while we present, and at the end we'll have some extra time for Q&A. Well, let's get into it. Start with some introductions. So my name is Danny. I've been working at NetApp for the last almost 7 years, and before that I've been working in other tech companies, working with AWS for almost 12 years now in different roles and different parts. So I'm very excited about today's webinar, talking about how we keep our data secure on AWS and especially our data. And now I would like to let my co-presenter, our esteemed guest for this webinar, Tom Tasker, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Danny. Hello, everyone. As Danny mentioned, my name is Tom, and my current role is as a storage solution architect at AWS based out of the UK. As you can see, I've held a couple of roles, and one of those icons should be particularly relevant. But in this current incarnation, I spend a lot of my time focused on global financial services customers. Why is that relevant? It's relevant because in financial services, there has been a lot of regulation and a lot of guidance and compliance on how financial service institutions need to protect themselves from what are called severe but plausible events. Normally, that is a ransomware type event. And like I said, how to protect, but more importantly, how can they recover their operations should the worst case happen? And so, again, it's where I spend a lot of my time, a lot of my day-to-day job talking to customers around how they can protect their mission-critical assets, how they can recover, and FSx for NetApp ONTAP forms the focus of those conversations. So thank you very much, and I'll hand you back to Danny.
Thank you. And I would like to get to know you a little bit with our introductory questions. Liat, if you can please send the survey. Okay, Liat, do we have the results? Okay, brilliant. So we see that we have most people in the audience are not too familiar with FSx for ONTAP, which is great. That's what we're here to tell you about. And let's keep going. Okay, so first of all, when we're talking about how do we protect our data? So as Tom mentioned, almost all organizations, some more than others, but it is something that is very common across all the verticals, are concerned about securing their data. Is it because of regulation? Is it because of other implications? And the most common model of protecting our data is by looking at the layers which encapsulate our data and protecting each layer with its own relevant tools and other software or other mechanisms that we have that can help us secure each layer. So the first one is the human security. We all, whatever we use, whatever service, we all have the very basic thing is username and password. Now we have multi-factor authentication, where username and password are just not enough in today's world. There's also perimeter security, the physical security of our data estate. That means that nobody can access our servers, nobody can get close. When we get to our offices, we need to produce our badge, etc. And another one is, of course, our endpoint security, endpoint being our workstation, our laptop, even in today's world, our mobile phone also must be protected, have protection tools there that, as we all know, always tend to pop out at the wrong time. But they are very important to keep our endpoint secure from threats that might try to exploit it. Another one, of course, is our app security. Whatever application we're using, whether for leisure or for business, also must be protected. Code could have vulnerabilities. I'm sure that the developers in the audience know all about writing secure code and trying to minimize breaches and weaknesses. And that's another important aspect. And last but not least, we've got data security itself, where the data resides. Essentially, what typically bad actors try to gain access to is our data, whether it is for espionage, greed, the idea to ransom it, to deny us access and try to obtain money to give us the access again, etc. So there are many threats, and essentially what we are trying to protect, the most important bit, is our data. And to understand, since we are working in AWS, we get a diverse and a very strong toolkit to protect ourselves from any threats that might occur. To really understand what tools we are getting, how AWS is helping us, what AWS is responsible for, and what we're responsible for, Tom is going to guide us through the shared responsibility model. Tom?
Brilliant. Thank you, Danny. So the shared responsibility model, I'm going to break this down quite clearly into its two component parts here and just kind of work through what that means in terms of AWS and customers who use the services as well. So if we focus on the orange part at the bottom at the moment, and I'm going to let some of the text on this slide do the heavy lifting for me. So you can see on the left-hand side with the AWS arrow, it says that under the shared responsibility model, AWS is responsible for security of the cloud. So what is of the cloud? As you can see then on the right hand side, we have these various layers and they just kind of naturally build up. So you can see right at the bottom, we have our regions, so 30 plus regions across the globe, the associated availability zones within those regions and those edge locations as well. On top of that, that's where we have the hardware, the AWS global infrastructure. So this is where we're putting all of that compute, storage, database, and networking hardware into those regions, availability zones, and crucially, those data centers. And then that software layer above that to expose all of those things as services for customers. So AWS is making sure that all of that is secure. On top of that, we then clearly have this blue section for customers. And this is where the language changes just ever so slightly, but ever so crucially. And this is where customers have responsibility for security in the cloud. Now, I won't go through all of these because they're quite long, quite long in terms of description. But as you just kind of flip through the blue areas, there's some common themes that start to come up: encryption, authentication, identity, access management, etc. Really, the kind of cornerstones of security in any environment, if you will. So a customer is responsible for the security of the cloud. Right at the top, as you can clearly see in this stack, we have the customer data. And the simplest way that I try and put this for customers is AWS will do its best because, if you look at any of our services, we say, 99.11 of durability for some of our storage services. We never quite go to 100% because we know that things can happen, things can go wrong, but we try our best to make sure that that data doesn't go anywhere. But it is the customer's responsibility that if that data becomes corrupted or that data is deleted, that if the customer does not have a recovery or a protection mechanism for that data, it is gone. Kind of full stop. There is no other comment to say on that. So it's absolutely critical that customers protect their data in the right way and also have the ability to recover that data, whether it's just as simple as a backup and a restore or another copy of that data somewhere, or as we're going to talk about during this session, if the worst case scenario should happen and there's some kind of ransomware attack, if there is some kind of event, which means that data is permanently lost on kind of the production systems, how do we think about protecting that and be able to recover that as well? So the shared responsibility model in two halves: AWS with security of the cloud and the customer responsibility for security in the cloud. Thanks, Danny.
Thank you, Tom. So let's talk a bit about the challenges in specifically in protecting our storage layer, since it is part of our responsibility. We get very good tools on different layers, allowing us to protect our data, but essentially it's up to us to make sure that we use them the right way, which is appropriate to us and would protect us from threats as best as possible. So the first thing is data integrity. We need to ensure that our data has not been corrupted or tampered with, and if it has been, how can we quickly recover from that? Access control. we have our data, our different data silos, data volumes, etc. We would like to ensure that only authorized users and services can access specific data, and that means authenticate our users or the services that access the data, and then authorize them according to the data that they are allowed to see and that they need to work with. Once again, we can build our protection to the best business effort and really do our best. But we are all people essentially. We're all human. We all have our blind spots, and sometimes um, we still might get threats and might get malware that somehow managed to breach our defenses. And if we have that malware, how do we mitigate it? How do we make sure that we detect any threats? And if we detect the threats, how do we mitigate them? How do we recover? How do we get back to business and minimize the impact of the breach? And last but not least, we've talked about the 7 layers of security. We have security measures and security tools at every layer. We want them to work concurrently. We want them to work harmoniously. And when they all work together, that means that our data is best protected. And I think before we continue, time for another poll. Liat, if you can please send a poll. We'd like to know what is your concern when it comes to protecting your data. What are you worried about? What keeps you up at night when you're thinking about your data protection? Liat, do we have the results? As I see now that I see the results, there's quite an even spread out. Essentially, people are mainly worried about backup complexity, high storage costs of our backups, the recovery time when we need to recover from a disaster or from a malware, and also some people mentioned compliance requirements, which I'm sure from Tom's experience is no easy matter. And with that, I think we can continue to the star of the event, to the storage service that we're going to talk about and how can it help us with protecting our data. And that's Amazon FSx for NetApp ONTAP. To explain what is it, how it fits in the AWS ecosystem, what's under the bonnet. Tom, please take it away.
Thank you, Danny. Can't believe you're already stealing my lines. Unbelievable. But you're absolutely correct. And actually, some very interesting poll results. So, if I can beg the audience's forgiveness very early on, for those that aren't familiar with FSx for NetApp ONTAP, and also that kind of backup complexity, those costs and those results from the polls, I'm going to use the next couple of slides to hopefully kind of answer some of those responses and just really show what's going on under the hood, under the bonnet of Amazon FSx for NetApp ONTAP, so that everyone can hopefully get a really good understanding of what that looks like. So as you can see here, this is really just the AWS storage portfolio that we have as of today. You can see on the left-hand side, Amazon S3, EBS, and EFS. But then smack bang in the middle, we have Amazon FSx for NetApp ONTAP and some other FSx services as well. And it's really just worth taking a second to focus on what the FSx family really is and what it does. And the reason I want to focus in on that is because for FSx, what we're doing here at AWS is we are hosting those first-party operating systems. So if we focus in for NetApp ONTAP, naturally as we would, it really is ONTAP under the hood. So this isn't AWS or somebody else trying to make it look and feel kind of sorta like the NetApp ONTAP operating system. It is ONTAP. This is a copy of the software that we receive from NetApp. We then put onto our infrastructure that we saw under that shared responsibility model and then make available for customers. So bar a few commands that you don't have direct access to because this is a managed service, and some of those commands wouldn't play well with having it as a managed service offering, you are essentially getting the ONTAP operating system with an AWS wrapper applied around it and then made available to consume. So for those of you that have potentially on-premises environments, think about the fact, we well, we don't quite literally, but in your on-premise or in your data center, when you've racked and stacked a hardware appliance and deployed it, we are doing that on your behalf inside of AWS, and we can do that very quickly. Once that file system has been deployed, what we really then want to do is take advantage of all of those things that ONTAP offers straight out of the box. So if we think about accessibility, this is offering all of the protocols that you would absolutely expect. And my apologies, I will say this more than once. It's ONTAP. So everything that you are doing today, if you are familiar with ONTAP, if you've used it in any way, shape, or form, all of these things are going to be familiar. So hopefully once this kind of family tree has been filled out, you should just be sitting there going, well, I do all of that today with my current ONTAP deployment. What's the difference? And that's a good thing, because hopefully there is very little to no difference. So back to accessibility. So we have file, block, and object storage. We have the ability to deliver multi-protocol, so NFS, SMB, and iSCSI. And what's worth noting here is that that block storage can also be presented to the Amazon Elastic Cloud Compute Service, EC2. So not a lot of people know this. So actually, if you want to take advantage of any block-based workloads that you currently have and be able to use FSx for NetApp ONTAP in the cloud, you can present that to the AWS EC2 services too and get all of those benefits that come with having that ONTAP storage layer underneath. So absolutely worth considering. Resilience and protection, exactly what we're here to talk about today. So you get that high availability straight out of the box, whether you have two nodes in the same availability zone, whether you distribute those across availability zones, whether you have two file systems in two different AWS regions and have SnapMirror for that disaster recovery and that backup, it's all available. And of course, we can't talk about NetApp without talking about snapshots, those point in time recovery options that enable so much agility in terms of not just data protection, but also being able to do CI/CD, to be able to take instant clones of huge data sets at almost a 0 byte footprint. And we'll talk a little bit more about those in the kind of data mobility section on the other side. For data security, we have that isolated data and security tenant. Again, it's ONTAP under the hood. So if you are using storage virtual machines today, if you have multi-tenant environments that connect to different active directories, to different domains, that is all there and available for you exactly as it is today in your current environment. We have immutable storage. So again, like I said right at the start, and there was a purpose for talking about that, I work with financial services customers. So having that SEC 17A4F attestation may not mean a lot if you're not in the financial services space, but what it means is that not even the root user, not even the admin user can delete that data. That is super critical when it comes to any kind of event that is manipulating or destroying or taking advantage of our data that it shouldn't be. We have the malware protection, and again, Danny and I will go through that in more detail as we go through the rest of the deck. Price and performance. This for me is absolutely where kind of best of breed of NetApp and best of breed of AWS absolutely come together. If you're familiar with ONTAP and those storage technologies, all of the storage efficiencies are available straight out of the box. You have deduplication, compression, compaction, thin provisioning. It's all there and it's all available. You can switch those on the volumes and you're kind of off to the races. Combine that then with the AWS side of things, where you are able to start very lean and mean in terms of a file system. You can absolutely go and deploy the very minimum that is available as part of the service, and then scale that up. So you can have megabytes of throughput and a couple of thousand IOPS through to gigabytes. So not gigabits, gigabytes of throughput and millions of IOPS and everything in between. So being able to get those efficiencies, being able to get that ability to scale, not just up, but also down, really kind of gives you that flexibility to have the file system that you want to be able to have when you're deploying it. Last but not least, data mobility and those copies. And we talked about those snapshots at the start. I mean, they are absolutely brilliant. I use this to demonstrate to customers how, if they have large databases, how they can quickly take those copies in less than a second. Normally, expose those clones, those copies of that data, like I said, to CI/CD, dev test, blue-green environments, and start to work on those. And then once they're finished, just discard them. And that's how, again, you can combine that with AWS. You can spin up that server fleet, try all of those things on the software that you would never do in production, and then take some lessons learned, write those standard operating procedures, and then when all is said and done, take all of that great knowledge and then get rid of it, and then go and apply that to production in some safety and security that's already been done. Remote writable data cache. I'm absolutely, this works, and I'm working with a customer right now who has their offices in Paris. So they're using the AWS Paris region, and they have a remote office in Madrid. So they have absolutely deployed a physical NetApp device in Madrid to act as their file cache, and they're keeping their data in Paris, and that is working exactly as it should do. Fast local storage in the Madrid office, all centralized in the AWS Paris region, where they can then collate that data and run their reports and do those things. And of course, and promise almost this might be the last time I say it, it's ONTAP under the hood. So in terms of data migration, you have that snap mirror functionality. You can just go and set that up and go and get it working. When I speak to customers about this, I often say to them, don't be surprised if I send you an email or I send you some data points and it contains NetApp links. The reason why it has those NetApp links in is because that has instructions about how to go and work with ONTAP to go and get it to configure. And they're very clear and they're very concise. And we mix that with the AWS documentation, because last time it is ONTAP under the hood, and those are all the good things that it can do. So hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of the engineering, the effort, the work that has gone into FSx for NetApp ONTAP, and all of the features and functionality that are available to you. And actually, there's a couple of things we haven't talked about that we'll touch upon as we go through this. So as for the rest of the presentation, then how are we going to approach all of these things in terms of what FSx for ONTAP offers for data protection? So we'll take a look at data integrity. Again, we're going to use those snapshots to allow us to create, and this is crucial, read-only, immutable backups, both local and remote. That's super important because it gives us that ability to have the data where we need it and protected how we want it to at the same time. We'll take a look at access controls, making sure that if we want to, we can have really, really granular data segregation. I mean, I'm talking down to the IP address of a single workstation if we need to be able to just really limit down that data access, and combining that with other access controls and security as well to build on those layers that Danny talked about earlier. Detection and response. How can we proactively look at what is happening on our storage array? Why is it important to actually have that happening, not just at our front ends, not just at the application layer, but also at the storage layer as well? So again, I'll pick that up once Danny's gone through data integrity and access controls and actually talk about the features and the functionalities that we have there. And then integrating with other security as well. No security practices are an island. It's not shuttered off. We have multiple tools doing lots of things, best of breed across the piece. So we'll take a look at integration with industry standard, some stuff from AWS, some things that are built natively into ONTAP. And then if there are any questions, we can take a look at those as well. So with that, I will hand over to Danny to go through the first section on the data integrity.
Thank you very much, Tom. So to start off with data integrity, Tom already mentioned that we can't talk about ONTAP without mentioning snapshots. Snapshots are read-only, point-in-time images of the data, of the logical unit of data in ONTAP called volume, and can be used for local backups or remote backups. So first of all, when it comes to FSx for ONTAP, as in any ONTAP system, data is stored in a logical storage unit called a volume. Volume data is stored in 4 kilobyte blocks. That's how it divides. And then the snapshot, when a snapshot is created, it is essentially pointers to the block. Meaning if we take a snapshot and we do not change anything on the volume, the snapshot does not take space. Once we start changing things on the volume, then the snapshots take space, but only the increment. So that means it is a very cost-effective way of protecting our data. The snapshots are typically kept locally, but with we talked about the integration between AWS and NetApp. So the backup mechanism of in AWS is AWS Backup, which essentially takes these local snapshots and stores them somewhere else on your cloud account, giving you a remote backup, which is not dependent on the file system itself. So the snapshot creation is instantaneous and does not initially take up space. Another good thing about snapshots is that they are, by definition, read only, meaning that let's say that your file system has been compromised by malware, by a ransomware that encrypts everything. It cannot encrypt snapshots because the snapshots are read only. But you might ask, what happens if the bad actors have gained control of an administrative user and will try to delete the snapshots to make sure that they have prevented access to our data, corrupted our data, or made their damage elsewhere? And here is where we have storage immutability. The NetApp users amongst you might know it as SnapLock. The idea here is not only to prevent modification, but also to prevent the deletion of data. So with storage immutability, you can find that some files or some volumes can be written once and then be read only and cannot be deleted or modified. Once again, it could be on the file level as well. It's called, the acronym is WORM. It is locked and for a predetermined, pre-configured period, meaning you cannot delete it even with the highest administrative privilege. So if you choose to do that, be very, very careful with what you're doing. And one of the other great things is that volume snapshots can also be made immutable, and we'll talk about that. We'll see it in the demo. How do we bring those immutable snapshots to good use? Why would you use them for? So first of all, complying to regulations, some financial, some organizations in finance and in health need to keep records for a long period of time. You want to make sure that these records have not been manipulated, deleted, corrupted, etc. So there, it definitely makes a hell of a lot of sense to make sure that they are not deleted, cannot be deleted by anyone or anything, and are kept safe for future use or for audit or for whenever you need that data. Same goes with protecting against ransomware. You can't encrypt something that's read only. You can't delete something that is immutable, and therefore that gives very strong protection against ransomware attacks that try to corrupt and encrypt our data. And last but not least, preventing accidental or rogue deletions. There's a saying, don't attribute to malice what you can attribute to stupidity. Well, we've all done, I can definitely attest for myself, we've all done very silly mistakes in our career. And when you have something that is preventable for deleting, even a negligent IT person like yours truly cannot delete that. And let's continue on to access control. If we want to prevent foolish people from doing foolish things, another mean is access control. That means isolating our tenants, that nobody accesses data that they're not supposed to access by intent or by mistake. First of all, we want to make sure that the volume data is only accessible to the associated tenant. I'm sure many of you are running production environments in the cloud, maybe SaaS environments for your customers. Sometimes you are forced to work in single tenants. When I was working with the financial sectors, producing SaaS software for insurance companies and banks, we had to create single tenants per customer with a very strict segregation to make sure that every environment resides on different resources. So here, with a volume level isolation, you can achieve that. And if your customers are more strict, you can use a storage virtual machine, which is a completely different domain. It is a stricter isolation. And with that, you can use one file system to implement single tenant environments that are all residing on the same file system with a very strict segregation. That's how segregation works with ONTAP. You can use the volume level segregation, which is an IP level. You can use SVM, which is an even stricter segregation if you want to make sure that all your environments are segregated indeed, and it is only feasible for members of one organization to access their data, and you want to make sure, absolutely sure, that nobody can access data they're not supposed to. And with that, we're going to talk about detection and response. We all know that we can do our best effort, but those bad actors, they're definitely not they know their job, and sometimes they can find a blind spot. And how do we protect ourselves if they have breached us? Tom, take it away, please.
Brilliant. Thank you, Danny. And can I just say, kind of just maybe over the halfway mark, thank you very much for the questions. While Danny was talking there, I was answering some of those questions around the service. Please do keep them coming. We've got a good number of attendees on here. There's no such thing as a silly question. The only time you feel silly is if you didn't get the chance to ask it, and then you've missed out on getting an answer. So as I'm going through this part, Danny will keep an eye on the Q&A, so please do answer any questions there. Ask any questions there if you're unable to. Back to the content. So autonomous ransomware protection, ARP. I really like this. I'm not sure if you're supposed to have a favorite feature of a particular storage service, but for me, this is it. Like I said, right at the top of this webinar, I spend a lot of my time talking to customers around data protection, data integrity, and making sure that if something does happen, how can we be proactive? How can we be as responsive as we possibly can be? Because again, we don't want to play too much on it, but really the idea is that it's often not a case of if something will happen, but when. And therefore, how can we just make sure that we limit any kind of impact? We get on it straight away. And even if we have to have, a reaction that was potentially not right because it wasn't something malicious, at least we have our data protected and we go for it. And this is really where ARP comes into the mix. So autonomous ransomware protection, what this is going to do, it's going to look, and the text does it for me, right? Real-time ransomware detection and response. So it's going to essentially look at, you're going to switch it on. You're going to go and activate this feature. And what it's going to do over time is it's going to start trending the volume. It's going to start taking a look at what is happening on that volume for a period of time. So it's going to have a look at kind of what writes are happening, what access patterns are happening, what file types are on there. It's really going to just start to understand what's going on. Then if we have our bad actor that comes along and decides to do something, and I can see Danny typing, so I'm going to let him off that he's not hit next on the slide. Thank you, Danny. So if our bad actor comes in, what they're going to do is, if they know what they're doing, and we're talking about attacks here that are, complex in scale. We're not just talking about someone that's, try to pester the firewall and he's a nuisance. If we're talking about an organized attack here, they're not going to go after the data directly because they know that's going to be secure. They know that's going to be hardened. There are going to be wrappers and layers of protection all around that data. Unfortunately, if they know what they're doing, and I say this hopefully in the right context, a good way of getting to the data and causing the most harm is via the application. Why is it via the application? Because if you think about what is looking for signals, if you think about what is looking in your environment for what bad looks like, an application having normal conversation, normal patterns of behavior to a volume is normal behavior. So if you are a bad actor, if you can put your signal into normal operations, it's going to be very, very difficult, if not impossible, for detection systems to be able to pick up that inside of that signal, that normal application traffic, that something malicious is happening. And that's, a really mean way of doing things, but these people aren't here to make your life easy. Unfortunately, they're here to cause as much trouble as possible. So once they've managed to get into the application, once they've managed to corrupt what's going on there, that bad data is then going to make its way into the volume and start to perform those actions that, regrettably, we don't want to have happen. As that volume of data lands, ARP is going to be looking at that volume and just be going, not quite as I would say, but looking at it going, whoa, hang on a minute. Suddenly there's some high data entropy. Something's happening on this volume that wasn't happening previously. There's a surge in abnormal activity. Why is it I've gone from 100 writes an hour to 10,000 writes in a couple of seconds? Something's not quite right here. This is not what we expect on this volume. Is there an extension that doesn't look like, we've been seeing documents, we've been seeing project files. Why are we suddenly getting extensions LCKD that shouldn't be in here? Right. Clearly something's not right. We are showing all of the patterns and all of the markers that something is happening on our data volume that we aren't expecting. So straight away, as soon as something is detected, as soon as something is suspected, there's going to be an immutable backup of that volume. We are going to just essentially lock that data down and go, right, that's it. This data is now secure. It cannot be deleted. So if our bad actor is doing something, we now have a good, clean copy of the data that we can revert back to. And that for me is absolutely crucial, because it means what we're doing is we are monitoring the data source. We are looking for patterns on the data that we might not spot in the application. I'm absolutely, we need layers of security, right? Danny talked about this. We need security everywhere. So it makes absolute sense to have a layer of security at the storage layer with ARP. And this isn't a plug, this is an absolute fact. If you are using Amazon FSx for NetApp ONTAP today, ARP is available and it is free of charge to use. So please, if you are using the service, go and take a look at ARP. It is absolutely free to consume. And for me, you would almost have to give me a good argument as to why it is not in consideration in terms of protecting your data. So hopefully I've done that feature a bit of justice. If we then now move on to integrating with other security methods, and there are tons of things we could talk about here. So we're just going to limit this down to a few AWS services that we have, and also what's built into NetApp ONTAP as well, in terms of that protection and in terms of the AWS services. So if we think about layers of access control, and again, kind of Danny really set this up nicely for me. What we want is layer upon layer of control, because that really helps us out. And what you can see here is you've got a couple of compute instances accessing a couple of volumes, and we can isolate, like I said, right at the start, if you can cast your mind back all that way, or down to the IP address. So if we just want a one-to-one mapping of a compute instance accessing the file system, we absolutely can. And we can segregate those off with security groups. We can absolutely just make sure that only the compute that we want, that we authorize, has access to those volumes. This is AWS as well, so we're also going to think about resources. So the AWS Identity and Access Management, IAM. If you do not have the right permissions, you cannot access the file system. So making sure that only those users that we want to be able to access that file system are in there as well. We talked about storage virtual machines and their ability to connect to Active Directory. You could have an isolated Active Directory running in AWS if you wanted to as well. You can have that connected and trusted with other Active Directories domains if you want to on that side of things. Again, but making sure that the options are there if we need to have everything localized and protected inside of AWS. And last but by no means least, what we also have is data encryption as well. You cannot create a file system, an FSx for NetApp ONTAP file system, without making sure that that data is encrypted at rest using the AWS KMS service. And of course, what we want is also encryption in flight, in transit, and that is based on the protocol and the connection type that you have between your compute instance and also the file system as well. So if we just go back to kind of Danny's 7 layers, you can see here we've got KMS, directory services, IAM, security groups, at-rest encryption, and everything else in between, ARP, just layers and layers and layers of security. And that's absolutely what we want in these environments. Just to then round out with what do we have within ONTAP? So on the box again, adding a couple of more layers here as well. So we have F policy. As an ex-file server administrator, I really like F policy, because what it's going to do is it's going to make sure that it's going to block anything that we don't like the look of, any operation. So if someone decides to put a file on there that we don't like, that's just good administration. But actually, if we think about that then from a ransomware perspective, easy for me to say as well, if we start to see files that are not named correctly, we can do that allow and deny as well. And as you can see, we can start to bring in that third-party software into F policy, which is great if you already have deployments of this as well. Table stakes for any environment goes without saying, of course, antivirus integration and vScan. And this is where ONTAP just does what it's been doing for decades. You go to open a file, it will do an on-access scan using your antivirus software of choice. If the antivirus software scans it and it doesn't like the look of it, it's going to give a deny. It's going to allow those layers of protection as well. And it's going, the antivirus software is going to take those remedial actions. So again, kind of last time from me, and this genuinely is the last time because I'm going to hand over to Danny for the demo to roll out. Just thinking again about, if we take nothing away, it's layers of protection, antivirus, so vScan, F policy, AWS encryption, identity management, Active Directory services, security groups, ARP. There's kind of 7 layers. I promise I didn't do that on purpose. That is a bit of a fluke. I wish I could have said I'd prepped that out beforehand. But there's 7 good layers of protection just by using this service alone, let alone what is in the partner landscape with dedicated security providers in that space as well. So really something worth looking at if you're using the FSX for NetApp ONTAP service. So that really is everything from me. I will now say thank you very much and hand back to Danny for the demo.
Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you for the explanation. And now it's time for us to get our hands a little bit dirty with a demo. So what we are going to do, I'm quickly going to switch to the demo environment, and we're going to take a look at Tom's favorite feature, and coincidentally mine's as well, ARP. So just a minute. Yeah, let's load the, you should see that the demo environment now. Okay, so before we begin, for brevity's sake, I'm going to use a tool by NetApp called Workload Factory. Essentially, it's a console that can detect our FSX for ONTAP systems on our AWS account. It also has many other features. When Tom was talking, I tried to answer some questions. I saw some question about pricing as well. So one of the things when it comes to Workload Factory, it has built-in TCO calculators when you can check if FSX for NetApp ONTAP is the right service for your workload. Does it make economical sense to use it? Now we are using, what we're using under the bonnet here is the AWS cost calculator. So the calculator on Workload Factory is very honest. Should FSX for ONTAP is not suitable for your workload, if it's more expensive than it, you will see it in the calculator. So I definitely recommend to take a look at Workload Factory, and the best thing about it, it's free. Why am I using it for this demo? Everything I do in this demo can be done without Workload Factory using ONTAP CLI commands, but it will be significantly easier to do it with Workload Factory, at least easier to demo, at least because it's with a UI and not with CLI commands. So I'm using Workload Factory for that, but if you don't want to use Workload Factory, that's fine. You can do it without. So first of all, I go to my storage inventory. I'm going to find the FSX for ONTAP where I want to, which I want to use ransomware protection. Click Manage and go to Autonomous Ransomware Protection, ARP. I get a warning before I enable. So first of all, let's enable. Then let's read the warning. Essentially, it will start. It says that ARP will start a learning mode and learn our patterns. And then when suspicious activity is detected, ARP will create immutable snapshots that cannot be deleted, and hence the warning. Because the problem with the snapshots that you can't delete is that you can't delete them if you need. And that's something that you need to be careful and mindful about using immutable snapshots or immutable files, that if you're making a mistake, it's a bit hard to fix. Anyway, let's do that and click Apply. And now it's time to go to, I have a CIFS share volume here that I connected to a Windows machine. I have some random files here, some PDFs, some documents, etc. And we're just going to take a quick look at this shared folder. See that we have lots and lots of files here. Would be a shame if someone did something to them, if an accident might happen, and that's going to shock you. But unfortunately, a bad actor has decided to attack us with ransomware and has started to encrypting our files, as we can see here. But fortunately, we have activated ARP 30 days ago, and ARP is going to protect our data. But as you can see, all our files have been locked, have been encrypted by the malicious ransomware, and everything has the LCKD suffix, which indicates that we have been breached and somebody has encrypted our data on our shared volume. Fortunately, for those who are a bit more familiar with ONTAP CLI, what I did here, I SSH'd to my ONTAP file system in the background. I am looking at the available snapshots that I have. I have a few snapshots, mutable snapshots by ARP. And now let's pretend that the bad actor not only was able to insert a ransomware to our shared file, but also stole my ONTAP credentials, maybe because my password there was password. And now the bad actor is trying to delete the snapshots. Let's see what happens now. Asking me if I want to delete. Because I'm a bad actor, I say yes. But now I get an error, illegal operation on snapshots logged by snapshot. So essentially, I can't delete the snapshots. What can I do now? Let's go to our shared volume again and restore some of the files. So we'll go into our restored snapshot folder. We can extract the file from there. And as you can see, that these are the same files that we saw at the beginning of the demo. We can restore them. These files might be harmful for your computer. I think it's a bit too late for that. And let's return them to the folder. And with that, we can conclude our demo. First, let's get rid of the, let's put them back. And we can say goodbye to our encrypted files. And with that, we can conclude the demo. Great, and now we'll go back to the presentation for some final words. Okay, should be able to see my screen now. So, to summarize, we've been talking about threats that we all face when we put our data out there, or not even out there, inside our own very own protected environments. How we protect our data, all 7 layers of data around it, and specifically where the data resides. And what tools does FSX for NetApp ONTAP brings specifically to protect us from malware? We've also touched a little bit about protecting against disasters. We have different webinars for that. If you're interested, you're more than welcome to wait for future webinars or look at all recordings, but we definitely cover that as well. We talked about how FSX for ONTAP uses authentication and authorizations with other tools, how it has ARP. Once we've breached, how ARP will trigger an immutable snapshot that cannot be deleted, and we can restore our data after it has been encrypted or corrupted. And we also talked about how FSX for ONTAP works with the other tools that protect our data on the other 7 layers. And to finish off, would be very grateful if you could answer one last poll for today. Liat, please hit it off. Liat, do we have the results? So I see when we are asking which service was most valuable, most appealing, I see that snapshots and clones have got into a very decisive first, which makes quite a bit of sense. I think it is, as Tom said, it is the very founding stone, the base, the basic foundation of ONTAP systems. You really can't talk about ONTAP without talking about snapshots. And if you're interested, we also be very happy to share the resources for this deck. Please know that you will be receiving the recording and the deck of this webinar. If you want to read on, if you want to dive some more of these other resources that we used, the QR code on the left-hand side is if you want to take a look at Workload Factory. If you just want to take the first steps, you can use the TCO calculators to see if FSX is the right fit for your workload. And with that, I think that most questions have been answered. Let's take a quick look. Okay. I see there are some questions that have been left unanswered. Okay, so here's a question from David. Can FSX and ARP automatically block suspicious users? So I don't think it blocks suspicious users. What ARP does, specifically, there are other tools to block user access. What it does, it recognizes suspicious behavior, and the mitigation, the immediate response it has is creating snapshots, encrypted snapshots. Immutable snapshots, not encrypted snapshots. And the idea here that once you have already been breached, you can still have a copy of your data, which you can either restore on the same file system, create a file system anew. The idea is here to save your data and not so much to block users. There are other tools for that, which are great. Let's see. Okay, there's what other question do we have here? Yes. Asking about autonomous ransomware protection. Is it available on on-prem ONTAP? It was available on on-prem ONTAP before it was available on FSX, I think. Once again, I'm not an expert on what's going on today with on-prem ONTAP. I would ask if you have on-prem ONTAP systems, I would consult your account team. They'll have much better answers than me, much more educated answers, that's for sure. There's a good one by Cameron. How does enabling ARP affect performance? I think the effect is very minimal. There aren't any significant storage penalties. And another question is does it depend on the size of the volume? Once again, I think the size of the volume mostly affects the time that it takes the learning period. There's a learning period of up to 30 days. I'm sure if the data is, there's lots of data residing there and lots of action. If it's sort of very intensive data, then I imagine the learning period would be longer. But there shouldn't be much more than that. Now, if you have any questions that remain unanswered, you can always reach out. We'd be very happy to provide answers. And I'd like to take the opportunity to say thank you. First of all, thank you, Tom. Really had a great time doing the webinar with you. It was really lots of fun. I'd like to thank Liat for sending us the polls and helping me in the background. And last but not least, I'd like to thank the audience. First of all, thank you for listening. Thank you for answering our polls, making it more interactive. And thank you for sending so many questions that really, first of all, helps us see that you are interested in what we have to say. You made the webinar much more engaging and much more interactive. So thank you for that. And I really hope to see you in future webinars. And if you found this one interesting, I'll be very happy if you look at some of the recording that we did in the past, if you find them interesting. So thank you very much. And with that, I'll say goodbye. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, Tom.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.